Bill to the House.
Well said, officer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I just commend the member who's resumed his seat and say the only point of disappointment I have with his contribution to the House is that he didn't acknowledge, as Deputy Chair of the Government Administration Committee, our absolute delight that the Minister, out of all the committees that he could have chosen to receive this bill for consideration, he chose ours. And as the Chair, I am particularly delighted that he's done that. I have to say that my delight is enhanced by the fact that we haven't got any other legislation before our committee at the moment. We've got the obvious budget-related reviews to go through. We've got an inquiry and we've got a petition. But it seems like the government's pretty well run out of work, which is amazing given that it's election year. We end up with the highlight of this week's debate seems to be a Statutes Amendment Bill. The member also noted that there's not much drama in this bill. Well, there shouldn't be, because it's a Statutes Amendment Bill. Every party in the House has to sign off as agreeing that the material in it is appropriate for a Statutes Amendment, therefore non-contentious in nature. But compared to the drama that we've had with the Minister of Justice this week when she was in China giving her anti-corruption speech at a conference, I don't think we need any more drama. I think she is providing us with more than enough drama to keep us entertained. This bill amends, I think it's 33 statutes, a number of which actually come under the responsibility of the Minister of Justice. I hope that she's been able to give them the sort of attention that they need, although I'm not sure that she has, given how busy she must have been preparing her answers and her apologies in relation to that trip. Mr Speaker, on a serious note, although we are debating something in this legislation being referred to the Government Administration Committee that is non-contentious, the actions that Judith Collins has undertaken that have been the subject of many questions in this House are not just contentious, but they're actually very unusual. It is unusual for any minister in Parliament to be so much on the edge of a clear conflict of interest, to be denying members of the public access to information and answers to questions, as well as members of Parliament, and yet to remain so aloof and arrogant about it. And I suppose that's the bit that has surprised me. I know that the Minister concerned has a level of arrogance that is surprising in comparison to most other members of Parliament. But to be caught out so blatantly and then to say in her apology, what is surprising is that I am apologising. That's what the Minister actually said. She said it's surprising that I'm apologising. So I think that disconnect with how people feel about the accountability and need to be able to trust their ministers is really surprising. We know that Judith Collins went on a taxpayer-funded trip to China. We know, that's right, we know the Minister went on a taxpayer-funded trip to China. We know that her husband went with her. What we didn't know before she left, and what we actually didn't know until it was prized out of her because of public exposure, was the fact that she actually had a visit to Aurovita, the company that her husband is a director of, and also had a private dinner, not just with the directors of Aurovita, but also with a Chinese border security official.
Point of order.
That's the Minister who's in charge of so many of these bills.
Point of order. The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, we are debating the Statutes Amendment Bill. Well,
Order. Points of order will be heard in silence, and there is no need to engage in unparliamentary language. I call the Honourable Dr Nick Smith for
Mr.
a point of order.
My point of order is that we are debating the Statutes Amendment Bill. That is not a licence to give a general debate speech or a diatribe on any particular member of the House, but to speak about the bill and what it will do for New Zealand. The member is not doing that, and I ask that you should call it to order.
Well, I just thank the member for his elicitation and say I am actually looking through the bill and trying to find something along the line. So I just ask the member to try and speak directly to the Statutes Amendment Bill.
I certainly will. I want to speak about the provisions in this legislation that come under the responsibility of Justice Minister Judith Collins. One of the amendments that is being made in this Statutes Amendment Bill is the Judicial Conduct Commissioner and Judicial Conduct Panel Act 2004. It is entirely appropriate that that's amended. I hope that the Minister is still in charge of that particular Act by the time this progresses to the Select Committee, but I think it's not entirely likely. One of the other amendments that is made in the Statute Amendment Act, and my colleague Andrew Little referred to it in his all too brief contribution on this first reading, was the fact that this Statutes Amendment is amending the Friendly Societies and Credit Unions Act of 1982. I think that that is an area that the current Minister of Justice, Judith Collins, will be very pleased to hear about. It was so obvious at question time today that a friendly society was something that she was desperately in need of as she blundered her way through questions about her engagement with Orovido and her inability to answer questions, and then further blundered her way through the ACC questions, exposing her misrepresentations in the House yesterday in relation to the document that she tabled. Mr. Speaker, I just want to talk about the last Statutes Amendment Bill that we had referred to the Government Administration Committee. It was smaller than this bill. This bill amends 33 provisions, and our one, I think, was smaller than that, but perhaps not by much. But our committee unanimously took the quite unusual view of actually removing some of the previously agreed Statutes Amendment provisions, because it was our view that when they were taken as a whole, they comprised far too much to be legitimately considered in a Statutes Amendment Bill. I think that was a very good position for the committee to take. The threshold for acceptance of amendments in a Statutes Amendment Bill should be quite high. We shouldn't use it as a way of sneaking things through, and I don't think that was the intention of the Minister. Let me make that very clear. I think it was a genuine attempt to get something not very big, not controversial, pushed through Parliament in a comparatively speedy way. But what our committee also did, and I think this was the good part that I just want to draw to the attention of the House, because I only referred to it briefly in passing in the deliberation on the previous Statutes Amendment Bill, was that not only did we remove those provisions, but we said to the Minister and gave the assurance at the committee that we would ensure the speedy passage of those provisions when they were moved into a separate piece of legislation. I think that's a pretty respectful thing to do. We had no doubt that the Minister was not trying to trick us. He wanted to get those particular provisions passed quickly. They weren't controversial, they were constructive. So I think we acted in a moment of multi-party common sense in an effort to make genuine progress on an issue that there wasn't any debate. I'm sure that we'll do the same on this current Statutes Amendment Bill. We will apply rigour to the consideration. We'll be applying the same sort of rigour to considering this bill at committee, that we will be applying rigour to the questions that we continue to ask Minister Judith Collins during question time. I have been surprised at the new standards in question time. It's a real shame that there's no statute amendment alteration in this bill in regard to the standards for question time. For a minister to be able to get up and say, that's quite a long question and I really can't be bothered answering it, might as well say, I've got a headache, I'm going to have a wee lie down in the lobby, could you just send something to me by email? This is the only time in the day of Parliament that we have the opportunity to hold a minister to account for a very serious responsibility that they hold as the minister of their particular portfolio. That is the time for opposition members. We only get half a dozen questions between the opposition parties a day, and then only 3 days a week, and then only when the House is sitting and not an urgency unless we've been given the opportunity to ask questions. So it's a very short period of time for us to get public accountability from the ministers, and frankly we've been really shortchanged by the Minister of Justice. I've seen some answers from ministers of the current government that I've thought, oh, you know, frustrating, and I don't think that's quite right. But I have never seen a minister just absolutely refusing to front up to their responsibilities. I hope that the Minister of Justice has taken her considerations and responsibility in the Statutes Amendment Act, the Judicial Conduct Bill, Misuse of Drugs, the Official Information Act, the other legislation that she is responsible for, the Ombudsman Act, all those pieces of legislation that are quite rightly the provisions of the Minister of Justice. I certainly hope that she has applied more consideration to them and will give the public more confidence in her actions as Minister responsible for these amendments that she has been able to do in relation to her Orovida visit. There is a clear conflict of interest in the Orovida engagement, where a minister has obviously promoted one company, a company of which her husband is a director, using her ministerial position. That's something that New Zealand doesn't often get to hear about. I hope that it's dealt with speedily by the current government, because it does this Parliament a disservice, and the Minister really needs to take that into account and vacate her seat.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Kamaljit Singh Bakshi. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the opportunity to speak during the first reading